There we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome back for our monthly mentor speaker series. We have with us today the lovely Ana Duenos, who's coming to us from sunny San Diego. Ana, do you want to take a few minutes and introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. So I am Ana Dueñas, and I'm an assistant professor of special education at San Diego State University. I'm also the verified course sequence coordinator for our BCBA program. And on a more personal note, I identify as transfronteriza, which means transborder. And I grew up living in Tijuana, Mexico, and San Diego, and kind of crossing the border on a daily basis. Most of my high school and college experience was that way, and some of my early childhood experiences as well. Let's see. I currently mostly am doing, teaching NDBIs within trying to infuse it as much as I can into our coursework, but also doing research with cultural adaptation of NDBIs.
Yeah. And you had an article, I don't have it in front of me, about
Mhm.
integrating NDBI into a task list or coming up with a task list to support
Yes.
professionals.
Yeah, so that work really came from um, some colleagues, and I kind of came together to create a special interest group within ABAI.
Mhm.
And quickly, a pretty large group of us kind of came together and had several discussions over the pandemic. I mean, I think when we all just had a lot more time, I think, to think about things. And so, yeah, we came together and kind of had this idea of this. We had many ideas, but one of those was, for those of us who are instructors within a verified course sequence in applied behavior analysis, given the rigidity of the sequence, right, how can we infuse NDBI material into those courses? And how could we make that
Mhm.
easier for folks who just wanted to kind of take that on? And so part of what we do, it's a little bit twofold. We offer like a sort of roadmap for a BCBA who might be interested in NDBIs, to kind of,
Mhm.
figure out what steps they might take to use NDBIs within their practice. But then the other was mapping on NDBI strategies within the test content outline, the sixth edition test content outline, just to give professors, like that sense of security that if they were modeling these strategies or teaching about NDBIs more specifically, that, and supervisors also, that they could go back to the test content outline and map that on.
Yeah, and how I come to know you and meet you
Mhm.
and love to work with you is through the NDBI SIG for ABAI, just reaching out and learning more about what you guys are doing and wedging myself in there to become a part of
Thank
it.
you. Yes,
Really
we really appreciate you doing that.
to disseminate. So I don't know if you want to chat more about that kind of sidebar, because that
Mhm.
might be helpful for members to learn about that there's a Facebook group and there are initiatives happening within the SIG for ABAI.
Yeah, there is a Facebook group. I think Sophia D'Agostino, who, was more like generated that idea and kind of led that idea, could speak more
Mhm.
about the ins of that. But what we try to do is, hold meetings. So at every ABAI conference, one of us tries to be there to hold meetings. We actually have funds, and this should be announced soon. We had to talk to Sophia about this. We have funds to support those who want to do research in NDBIs and present at ABAI.
That's
Those,
amazing.
yeah, those funds came from presentations that we gave from some of the papers we've published. And so, uh, yeah, so
And you
there's
guys have
that.
a website. I know I've seen the website.
We have a website. I think we are on X. I was going to say Twitter,
It's going to do, I think it is.
which, yeah, which people, may or may not be using anymore.
Yes.
Uh, yeah.
Very cool, very cool. And I'll link those up to when I post this kind of on the show notes. I'll link those resources so members can go and check it out if they want to learn more about everything. But that's exciting. I'm going to watch for that announcement about the researcher presenter funds because that's really great.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're excited to have that.
So your research with NDBIs, you're doing a lot with cultural adaptivity, correct?
Adaptation, yeah. So I have a project right now. It's a 4-year project. And the first year involves conducting a needs assessment. And that's to understand the needs of specifically the transborder rural community in California.
Mhm.
So there's we have a border obviously here, San Diego and Tijuana, but we have another border east of here that's in a rural area. And so it's Mexicali, which is actually the capital of Baja California, not Tijuana. Tijuana is a larger city, but Mexicali is the border, is the
Oh,
capital. And that borders Calexico and on the US side. And so the project in the first year is really about understanding what would need to be, adapted to meet those families' needs. And just to kind of give an example, a lot of these families, the border's fluid for them. It's not this like, huge endeavor or the way that we might like see it politically, right? Like this it's more of the for those of us who live going back and forth, we have families on both sides of the border. It's a weird thing, but we, cross it every day. It's
right.
fluid.
Okay.
Yes, we
Okay.
go back and forth. And so one of the things that we're doing as part of the needs assessment is really understanding what the daily routines of those families look like, right?
Uh-huh.
They might spend 2 hours at the border every day. And so when we're thinking about specifically parent-mediated interventions, we really have to consider what the broader, world looks like and the needs of different families. But also this, bicultural, bilingual aspect around NDBI strategies. And that area is really interesting. So there's only 10 agencies providing in-home ABA right now. And so they have
Yeah.
a lot of needs. A lot of families have been waiting. We've interviewed so far about 8 caregivers, and most of them have waited over a year at every juncture.
Oh,
So from securing a diagnosis to then finding an ABA agency that will serve them, to then waiting still for assessments to begin and an actual program to start. And so part
oh.
of what we're trying to figure out is where could we infuse within that system
Mhm.
some NDBI, parent-mediated NDBI strategies while parents are waiting.
Yeah,
And so
that's
that's what we'll test out once we've conducted the adaptation itself. And part of the adaptation, I think, is going to involve, I mean, I don't know yet, since we're in the first year, but I think it's going to involve these 2 pieces, right? So where can the interventions themselves be adjusted, but also what do practitioners need to know about how to adjust them? And
yeah.
what are the behaviors of practitioners that they need to have? So for example, we've talked a lot about, and I think within NDBI, there's a lot about caregiver empowerment, and those kinds of things. So that's part of why I chose these strategies. They tend to lend themselves better to
Mm.
adaptation across cultures. But the truth is that they haven't been, tested enough with diverse families. And that is really across the board around autism interventions, right? The samples are primarily white and families from high SES
Mhm.
backgrounds.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then are there any providers in Tijuana across the border that are doing ABA services, providing them, or are families?
Oh, that's a whole can of worms. Yes. So I actually have, a team of, we're a small but growing team of about 5 researchers. And I have a student who is actually doing that piece right now. She is interviewing providers across the border, so both Tijuana and Mexicali.
Okay.
And we developed an interview protocol where we're asking about autism services, not just ABA, but broader.
Sure.
But what we are finding is indeed, yes, I would say psychologists at the bachelor's level are providing ABA strategies, and we've heard a few say they're doing like Project Impact,
Okay.
uh, but they've like watched a workshop or something, you know,
Mm.
and then are so
The standards
unfortunately,
are not.
yeah, unfortunately, yeah, and that's complicated. So it's not that folks have lower standards, right? It's that there is such a need, and not enough resources in their community to
Yeah.
meet those needs. And we're also learning, for example, the pathway in Mexico is such, right? So to be able to diagnose and provide therapies, professionals just are required to have a bachelor's in psychology. And we've also been in these interviews kind of learning that providers, like when they're in school and in their preparation programs, there are no currently, in a lot of the major universities in Tijuana, there are no specialists in autism at all. So how they are learning these strategies, for example, we'll hear that they've, attend workshops online in Argentina or Spain, because, those are Spanish speaking countries that might have better resources. And so,
Mm.
yeah, um, we're learning a lot of that. It's really important, I think, for those of us working in border cities, that we understand where families are coming from and what models they've received, good and bad, right?
Mhm.
We've also been learning that there is a lot more of a family-centered focus in Tijuana and Mexicali, and in supporting the whole family. Whereas I think we have a lot to learn here in the US around being able to do that, especially within the ABA,
Mhm.
you know, community agency realm.
I agree. And especially, I feel like NDBI is kind of, with the parent empowerment, like you said, they map onto that so seamlessly, as opposed to maybe some ABA professionals where I'm the professional, I'm the expert, do what I say, right? It doesn't have the same kind of co-construction of the goals or the shared meanings and vision and values and what's socially significant to the family. I feel like is more equal within NDBIs as opposed to, yeah, we hear you, we might take that into consideration in the ABA,
Right.
you know,
And
all of them,
and
but the
and
majority.
being flexible. I mean, that's, I think,
Mm,
one of the things we've learned so far from those who've done some work on cultural adaptation of NDBIs is we have to expand this caregiver um, mediated term, right, to
mm,
who are all the caregivers involved. Because
yeah.
oftentimes there are grandparents, especially with the Latinx community, there are grandparents or, aunts involved, pretty significantly, right? Not that they're like, you know, a lot of these homes are multi-generational. And so we
Mhm,
have to, a lot of the families are asking, for those things. Why are we not
mhm,
coaching everyone, coaching all of the caregivers, empowering all the caregivers, and then thinking about what their roles might be when we're examining daily routines,
mhm.
who needs to be trained when, and in,
Mhm. Who gets the
depending.
children ready for school? Who gets the children ready
Exactly.
during the
Mhm.
daytime? Is that grandma, auntie,
Yeah.
abuela?
Yeah. And what are some of the things they can do within those routines? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I know that they translated, I don't know if you know this, the Help Is in Your Hands, ESDM online parent coaching modules. There's 4 modules that
Oh,
are available, and those have been translated recently into
yeah.
Spanish.
Yes,
But I
I love
need to check.
this.
Yes, if you Google that, I need to check if it's Spanish from Spain. I feel like there was that distinction that it was translated into Spanish, but it is Spanish possibly from Spain. So it might be a little bit different than you'd find in Mexico. But let me send you a link for that if you can't find it, because that would be a wonderful free resource that's available
Yes,
through
I
C.
would, yeah, and I'm obviously familiar with that program, and we
Uh,
actually used it in a pilot cultural adaptation that I did in Pennsylvania, and what we did
Okay.
was dub it.
Oh,
We because we didn't have the resources
it's
to,
done.
but it's been done. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Great. Yeah, we
yeah. So I would
definitely
think most
love to
of
link
us
to
the
that.
gist of it. Yeah. So I think we go into the help is in your hands login page. There's an option for English or Spanish somewhere on maybe the left bottom. Somewhere there's a way you can enter the site. And so
Mhm.
whatever version you go into, it's translated for you. So that might be a wonderful resource.
Yeah,
Great.
Project Impact is also, sorry to interrupt you, Project Impact has also been translated into
Oh, great. I
Spanish
didn't
from
know that.
Spain. But
Same
and
thing.
folks that have used it in the US with the Latinx community have found it difficult
Okay.
because there's a lot of words that aren't the same.
That's really good
Um,
to know.
but we don't have to, I mean, that would just be so resource intensive. We don't have to translate the entire manual again, but we could provide like a glossary of words or something to kind of help
Keyword.
folks. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea. I'll take that back to the lady in Spain because we were talking about that. We were on a meeting the other day, how we could support what they're doing there and bring it over here to the States and down into Mexico. And maybe that's a quick fix, is here's kind of the key phrases that might differ what they mean and
Mhm.
substitute those in when you hear them as you listen to the modules and watch the videos.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I
But
didn't
I
know
think
Project Impact was done. That's great. I'm going to add that to my resource list.
yeah. I'm sorry you're not feeling well.
I know. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to quit sniffling through your thing. Do you have any advice for professionals or research students who want to get into NDBIs or kind of how you
Well,
felt?
email me. I'm always looking for
I
anyone
know.
who wants to partner with me in doing this work. Um, uh, Advice is, yeah, reach out. I mean, there are not a lot of us doing this work in terms of cultural adaptation. Um, and I haven't gone into what that really means. There's still a little bit of controversy, but my understanding, given the model that I'm using, is that because we don't have the time, right? We're talking about these families who have already struggled to secure services in the first place. We don't want to delay things even further. And so instead of like starting over and saying, well, we're going to develop what an NDBI would look like, with Latinx communities or historically minoritized communities, that would take so much longer. And so the idea is to provide, resources through the cultural adaptation process to understand what matches and what doesn't match their cultural, their beliefs and practices and their parenting practices. A lot has come up. So yeah, I guess my advice is reach out to, people who are doing that work if you're interested um, in doing that.
Is published on that yet?
No, we have,
Okay.
I mean, I have one paper that
Okay.
was published during the pandemic, and it's about cultural adaptations in the pandemic because
Okay.
I was doing some pilot work back then. That's Vanegas et al. 2019, I think, or 2020. I can't remember the date. I'm happy to send that to you. But yeah, I have things under review right now, and I am, as part of my project, collecting data.
Please.
But yeah, look out hopefully soon. It's hard to do everything, but yeah, hopefully these papers will come out soon. Uh, what other advice I have? There is, some emerging literature that's, talking about and understanding the existing mechanisms for adaptation. So the ecological validity framework,
Nice.
was developed by Bernal and colleagues in the 90s. And it looks at 8 dimensions. So it's a little antiquated, but we are continuing to use that as a framework. I mean, I think the reason we've continued to use it is in many ways it works.
Mm.
But I think there's some areas we need to expand on. I think especially around this idea of what are the behaviors that are required from the practitioner, right? Because you can have this amazingly culturally adapted manual.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but if the practitioner is not using empowerment methods, isn't really listening to the family's needs and really understanding them and meeting them where they need to be met, then, the
Yeah.
manual's useless.
So it's almost like a
So
different subset of interpersonal skills or those soft skills that people need to have if you're supporting families. It's a different style of approach.
yeah, we call it cultural humility, cultural
Mhm.
responsiveness.
Mhm.
There's um, a lot of terminology that's come from that, but it's very difficult. And I think from a behavior analyst point of view, it's like very difficult to operationalize
I was
what
just
these
going to ask you,
behaviors
how would
are.
you
Yeah.
break
Part
that?
of what we're doing in this year, also in this needs assessment, is we have the luxury that Project Impact has been infused in the community here. So Dr. Sarah Reith here at SDSU has done work training community providers on NDBIs. And so she's got videos of Spanish-speaking providers working with Spanish-speaking families. And so we're looking back at these videos and coding for what does that look like, right? If they're being
Mhm.
culturally responsive, what does that actually look like?
Oh,
And
that's
if they're
great.
not, what does it look like? So we have about, quite a large number of videos to examine, and I'm excited to do that.
Yeah.
We're looking at parent engagement as part of that also.
And then from those videos, you can kind of sit down and pull out, this is an example of what that looked like, responsive versus dismissive, or whatever the terms might be, to really support families and kind of customize a training program based on that to really support providers. I think that's so important. And I think sometimes families will just hook on to whoever they can get the services from, whether it be the best fit, a good fit, or not a good fit. So I think that's a great way to line that path for families to really make sure that it is a good
Yeah.
fit for their family.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you like kind of said it, they don't have the luxury,
Mhm.
to, and there are some cultural parts of it too. So there's unfortunately, this uh, tendency in the Latinx community to defer to experts and
Mhm.
not push back, even when things aren't feeling like they fit your family. And also, you add to that the fact that they've been waiting a year and a half to get services in the first place.
They
So
want
they're very reluctant to push back in any way out of fear of losing what
mm,
they have, Something not great is better than nothing when you're in that kind of cycle of disparity. Yeah.
yes, yes, I agree. And I think that's even more powerful to get those parent-mediated interventions to really empower the parents. So you are the expert in your child. They might have the knowledge to come in and help guide you, but you know your kid better than anybody else, and you know your family values better than
Mhm.
anybody else. So how can we support them and really align that? And I think the NDBIs are the way to go, and the research you're doing is going to be pivotal in that. It's really
Yeah,
exciting
I
to see
hope
what's going to come
so.
out.
Yeah, I hope that at least we kind of get a better sense of what's going on. Yeah, as I said, the study ends in a pilot efficacy study once things have been adapted. And um, my hope is that once we're actually doing this work, that we'll learn even more, right? These first couple of years of exploration, it's hard. It's
Mhm.
hard to make any kind of recommendations so far.
Okay. Yeah. Any other resources that people could look into if they were interested in more about the ecological assessment that you mentioned, or if they were thinking about NDBIs in their country? We have a lot of members from outside the US in the membership. So I'm thinking of how Ukraine, England, I'm thinking of how this would resonate with those individuals, what they could do to start thinking about how they can adapt NDBIs to their cultures.
So this isn't specific to NDBI, but a colleague of mine shared this group has, kind of similar to what you've been developing, but it's actually specific to how you might infuse bilingual
Okay.
um, education into an AAC, and I'm putting this in the chat for you. And
Thank you.
it's a group of SLPs who've developed so many resources around recommendations about which AAC devices, really lend themselves well to bilingual education, and just a bunch of handouts for parents and professionals, and they have a bunch of resources on their website.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of cultural adaptation, I'm happy to share. Uh, it's most of what I know comes from research papers, so I'm happy to send those.
Yeah, if
Uh,
you have like top 5, top 3,
yeah,
just something to kind of get people started if they wanted to learn more
yeah,
about it.
yeah. I'm happy to send those out. I definitely have a list of top 5. I can share
Wonderful.
those with you later, um, so
Wonderful.
you can link them up.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, and I'll make sure to put your email out there if you're okay. If people want to come study,
Yeah,
come
please.
research in San Diego, come down
Yeah,
there.
our website is under, I have obviously my SDSU website. Our website is under development. We do have a Facebook page
Okay.
for some of the work we've started. Let's see what my graduate student is the one doing it. So I don't know the actual. And I
Uh-huh.
was saying I'm really bad um, at managing. But yeah, I'm happy to send those out so you can share them.
Thank you.
Uh,
Yes, I'd love to share them
yeah,
with the members so they can look into it more and learn more about it if they're interested.
yes, absolutely.
Oh, we really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.